In Houston, I'm John Herder. It's Tuesday, 28th day of March. Great as always to see you. Thank you for coming along. In a nutshell, From the Experts is a virtual networking opportunity flow accelerator, helping leaders across industries connect very quickly in a brief, moderated, interactive format. Yeah, we're like a TED Talk with interaction. And if all goes well, your curiosity is sparked, new ideas accelerate action, and you may have helped yourself or somebody else solve that problem, make a connection, reach the opportunity faster. Networking has never been more important for your business. Folks, help me welcome guest expert Marise Mikulis. Marise is a broadly experienced business leader with a proven track record delivering numerous successful programs centered on change. Her affiliations span companies large and small, notably Baker Hughes and Microsoft. These days, as CEO of Energy Innova, she helps leaders lead and successfully deliver change to produce measurable business improvement that they're accountable for. She holds degrees in geology, mathematics from Tufts University, and she is CCMP certified change expert. Hello, Marise. Well,
hello, John.
I have to say, you had me at 75% corporate change pursuits don't succeed. Wow, that seems pretty shocking and really kind of unacceptable. But, the more I reflected on it, my experience is slowly pulling me back into, well, I can see how this is actually possible. So we're grateful that you could stop in, share your approach, some of your latest insights with the FTE network today, and, how this is relevant to our business. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for that kind of introduction. And I'm really excited to be invited to be on the FTE show. It's such a great format and a great group. I'm very pleased to see the folks that are joining from everywhere. And I really actually, in the spirit of the networking that the FTE show is really built upon, I thought maybe this might be a good time to do a little icebreaker to get us acquainted a smidge. There's a couple of polling questions that we have, and I'm going to ask John to help me out on this. So if you would, I'm going to ask first a little bit. The first question is about your experiences with change in recent history, if you will. And then the second question is about your perspectives as a result of that. And so if you would take just a moment to don't think too hard, just give us all a sense for where you're at. That'll help us get to know each other a little better.
Marise, just real quickly, there's a little bit of back feedback on your sound. Can you make just a tiny adjustment? We're getting a little bit of feedback. Let's see.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
This down.
It's kind of snuck in there. We're still doing the survey here. We're getting closer. We got about 75% of that.
Did that make any difference or not?
Yes, sounds better. Thank you.
No difference?
Yes, it's good.
Oh, brilliant.
Very good. So let me show you. This is what this is where we are.
Ah. There we go.
33% are leading and delivering the change. Some are in the change, about 7%, and about more than half are in both. I totally believe it's people have
That's
to.
That's really helpful to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it flows down to us and we flow it down, I suppose.
Exactly.
Great. This is really helpful.
I just pulled it down. I've got it saved for you.
Well, yeah, that's fine. Thank you all for that. I appreciate it. I took the liberty of doing a brief look at folks who said they might be joining today. And the observation I got is that you are all working on some incredibly heavyweight challenges. You're working on energy transition, major social transitions, market inflections, digital transformation. The list is long and they're not small challenges. I appreciate your joining. If you'll indulge me, I would offer that at the very high level, there's some consistency to what you all are doing. And in that regard, I'll say that your goal is to produce some solution and have it get used. That is some solution to your challenge, whether it's a new technology, some new process, an organization change, or anything that you may be up to. And the key is not only getting that done, but getting it used and getting it used at scale. And by that, I mean with sufficient use that it reaches a certain tipping point where you get momentum in adoption and you even get sustained adoption, that durable adoption. That's at the core of the goals that you're working on your challenge. And so it's very significant. And I will offer that, in fact, that durable adoption is also at the root of the risk that you have, because the odds of your accomplishing that are not good, as you saw from all the abstract, and as John remarked, those odds can be shifted. And that's really what I want to speak about today. That's where I have put my focus in my career. I don't hail from the HR arena. I hail from the business side. And this is something that I feel is very significant to delivering value in our businesses. So I work with different clients in this arena. I have certain, and in doing that, there are some consistent questions that come up. What I thought I would do is I would bring out three that come up pretty regularly. There are clearly a lot more, but I'm just going to as quickly as I can, touch on those three and then open things up to discussion. Maybe these will give you some ideas, and I'd love to get some feedback and other thoughts on how you do things. So the three things I want to talk about are that come up a lot are getting everybody on the same page about what change management is. That is, getting our change program all rowing in the same direction. The second thing is demystifying resistance to change. And the third thing is about measuring what matters, and that is, yes, data and metrics around our change program. So with that, I'm gonna jump right in.
Take it just a second. Make that adjustment one more time.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I see. Thank you, Rupesh. If it happens again, I'm going to completely change headset. So please don't hesitate to tell me. Does this make any difference?
Good. Better?
Okay. But please don't hesitate. Obviously, I don't want to subject you to this. All right. Well, let's talk about what change management is anyway. The reason I bring this up is that it's not very common for one of these undertakings to begin with an assumption that everybody knows what change management is. And what that says is that, well, I know about management and I've been through change, so I'm sure change management is managing change, like a project management. And I want you to know that there is actually a lot of rigor and discipline in this arena. There's actually a definition for change management, and I'm going to rattle it off for you just so that you know what it is. It comes from the International Association of Change Management Professionals, and they're widely adopted standard for change management. Let's see if I can rattle it off correctly. So change management, oh, it's back. Okay, I'm going to change my audio just one moment.
Got it. Na, 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 No, 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 no. Okay, for those of you not from the US, that's a game show waster. So it's supposed to be funny and distracting,
Let's
and
see, is that making any difference?
it can. It needs to. Your volume needs to be raised if you can.
Is that making any difference?
Yes, it is.
A moment.
Dun, 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 dun,
Is that any difference?
dun. Perfect.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. If that doesn't work, I'll find some other speakers. Just a second. Okay. So the thing about this change management definition is as follows. It is the practice of applying structured approaches to transition an organization from a current state to a future state to achieve a business objective. So that's very formal sounding. I'm going to say it again. So it's a structured approach. So it's not magic to transition an organization that's people from a current state to a future state. That's our new normal to achieve business benefits. And that's our goal. All right. Now, what change management is it's not project management. It's very closely aligned with project management. And by that, I would say project management delivers a solution to an organization. That's that effort. And change management delivers the organization in time for the solution. So these things work, these groups, these leaders work very closely hand in hand. This is important to distinguish because this way our change team can all be rowing in the same direction and expectations are set about what we're actually working on. So I want to get that out there, and it really does make a big difference later on in a change program, because later on, I've been on projects where people say, well, we did this, this, and this. And the answer is, well, that's actually not enough to do actual change management. So we want to get that out there at the beginning. That's why I'm bringing this up. The second topic I want to speak about is change resistance. And this is always on everyone's mind. And I want to use some graphics to help me unpack this a little bit. And hopefully my technology will serve me on this one. Let me see if I can do this correctly. All right. So I'm actually not sure. I don't know how much. I think you're seeing just my slide. And
We
so
are
I'm gonna
seeing just your slide. That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Well, the fundamental question is, why are people so obstreperous? I mean, honestly, why does everybody give us such a hard time when we're trying to introduce these really significant improvements that will help everybody? And the answer to that is it's actually not a choice. And I'm going to unpack this and explain what's going on in our brains when a change is imposed on us. Okay? So, first of all, it's an exhausting, painful, frightening loss. It's exhausting because all of the hard wiring that our basal ganglia has put in place in our brains to conserve energy has to be unwired. That takes energy. And then it has to be rewired for the new normal. Again, energy consumption. It's exhausting. It's painful. It's painful because when you imposed this change on me, you didn't ask me about it. I wasn't involved in shaping it. And so I feel actually very isolated. And in that circumstance, the part of our brain that processes isolation is the arterial cingulate. And that is where all of our pain is processed. And that's how isolation is processed as pain. Okay. And then it's frightening. It's frightening because we're in pain and we don't know where it came from or why. And this is the perfect trigger for our amygdala, our reptilian brain, to jump in with our fight, flight, freeze reactions. Okay. And finally, it's a loss. And a key thing about this loss is that our brains don't process loss and gain in the same place or in the same way. And so, any effort to talk about a silver lining or the glass half full doesn't really hit the mark the way we wish that it would. Okay. And so, the point that I want to take away from this is that resistance is a real risk. And it's at the same time, this behavior that we're experiencing as resistance is something that has been part of human evolution for eons. And so this is not touchy-feely stuff. This is not mysterious. It's actually very objective and it's very scientific. It's just not many of our sciences. It's neuroscience. Okay. Well, this gives us reason to reframe how we show up with resistance. For example, in light of what I just said, this is a very predictable situation. It's resistance is something we can anticipate, we can assess it, and we can put in place activities to manage it. It's not one size fits all, I want to say, but it is absolutely something that can be handled. I also consider it favorable, twisted though I might be. When I start to get reactions from people that are grumpy about my change, I know I'm getting through. All right. Now, the key thing is to keep their resistance and just unhappiness focused on something besides the messenger. But the key thing is their brain is working. Okay. And then the third thing is that, in fact, resistance can be highly desirable. In the case of safety and environmental and health, we need people to call stop work when they see that there are issues at hand. And so that's the nature of resistance. And I invite you to reflect on this and the potential for handling it in new and different ways. So the way that we address resistance and major risks on our change projects, there are many tools we have in our toolbox. There are, let's see, there's communication and there's training. There's our change team and change agents, the role of our leaders. There are methods and models for execution, and there are data and metrics we can apply. Well, I'm not going to unpack all those. You'll be relieved to hear. I am going to get into one in particular that really, and not surprisingly, people avoid, and I feel like it's really worth spending a minute on it. You know, metrics serve our change project while it's coming to life, but it also serves it as we establish its persistence. And so by monitoring adoption behaviors and change challenges after implementation and deployment, these things that are simmering below the waterline of our iceberg, we can get early warnings about how our change is flourishing or floundering. And the kind of data that serves us here is more pseudo data and surveys. So think heat maps instead of very specific graphs. These go a long way to giving us a sense for where we are and where we need to be putting our attention in terms of people readiness and change adoption. And so we need to measure what matters for the part of the program we're in. It's very important not to stop once we deploy and implement. So I wanted to mention that. With that, those are my sort of top 3 things I wanted to be sure and bring out, perhaps stimulate a little conversation around. But that's my opening volley. I would really love to have some discussion and responses. I'm very curious in your own experiences with change. You know, you may or may not have had a chance to think of something before you arrived, but many of you have been working on change in recent history. So I don't know if we have a brave soul who's really ready to ask a question or put something out.
Well, you've done, thank you very much for your comments, Marisa. And you can take a look in the chat. Karen's put something there while you're reading it. I'll just remind folks, if you're new to the show, it's like a TED Talk with interaction. We're switching over to the group discussion. And we have a general question or a series of questions that our expert has put out there to get it rolling. But also feel free to ask whatever is on your mind based on what you've heard. We've got a pretty intimate group, so we can go from 30 to 60 seconds or so, right, to give everybody a chance. You can raise your hand or you can just speak out. And if you want to pass, that's A-OK. And keep the chat box active if you've got resources. So here is Marisa's question for the group. I'm going to actually put a couple of them in the chat box. Marisa, do you see Karen's?
I do, and I think maybe I'll jump on that. And then we had a hand raised there. I think it was Vincenzo. Maybe I'll come back to him in just 1 second. Let me speak to Karen's if that's okay.
Sure.
So Karen's question is, what's our take on the following? COVID was massive unwanted change exercise. Will this make us better at changing or even more resistant to change because we're more anxious overall?
Right.
Before I jump in, actually, I'd love to hear if any of you have opinions on that.
Feel free to speak up.
So, in my experience, before COVID, predominantly, a lot of the change engagement activities that I conducted, or the firms that I was with, that we conducted, our preference was to have more in-person workshops, interactive sessions. A lot of them used to be cafe sessions where we hosted informal get-togethers, with just donuts for breakfast or kolaches or something like that, just to get the stakeholder group familiar with either the design or our timeline or a high-level process that had changed. I do see that during COVID and even now after, a lot of these sessions, the preference definitely is for them to be online or remote. And this is taking into consideration the locations where people are, but despite that, with the organizations moving to a hybrid model, I think hosting a lot of in-person workshops, I've personally felt they were very beneficial versus online, where we need to make sure that everyone is interacting every 4 to 5 minutes just to keep their attention on.
That's great.
Feedback, Marisa?
I wondered if people were picking up on, when I was talking about resistance to change and that this isolation is processed as pain, if there was recognition of the connection to the pandemic and our isolation. And I think I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the term, but there is a very well-known term. It's used a lot. It's called change fatigue.
Yep.
And in fact, we need to be mindful of what everyone is coping with. And that's one of the things that we do when we design and assess our change program, is what other things are going on. How much can people actually take? It doesn't necessarily mean that we don't proceed. It may mean that we make the program into smaller chunks so that so that our people can absorb the change in a very constructive way. Comments?
Yeah, so we see that Kartik comes in, he says, hey, culture and change go hand in hand. Hence, isn't it better to focus on building resilient culture versus change management?
Yes, change management is, in fact, that's why the particular definition that I shared was to distinguish that this is a broader effort and can be highly strategic, operating at many levels. And so when we're working on a cultural change, like an energy transition, if I may, which I'm very, mindful of, we're not going to solve that with one change program. Okay, so there's going to be a number of strategies that interconnect, and there will be multiple layers of change strategies that interconnect. These will affect our change in culture in terms of how we use energy. And so I agree very strongly with the point that at the core of this is a cultural and behavior change. And so behavior change is at the key for durable adoption.
Got it. Yeah, go ahead, Jana.
Going old school since I couldn't use the raise hand icon. Hey, Marisa, it's nice to see you.
It's wonderful to see you, Jana.
I work with a woman who has a company called PMO Strategies, and she isn't just focused on PMO, but this question of but having impact regardless of what it is you're trying to do. And one of the things that she says quite often is that people change all the time. Like we get married, we have kids, we get new jobs, we leave old jobs, so on and so forth. And it's not so much that people resist change, it's that they resist change being done to them. So I think the process of instituting changes in a company or anywhere really needs to be done in collaboration with people, so that we're bringing them along on the journey instead of thinking everything through and then saying, here you go, here's this nicely wrapped gift of change, have fun, sort of thing.
Lynn?
Yeah, no, I'm laughing about the nicely wrapped gift of change. So yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one of the principles of building an inclusive organization is figuring out who's going to be impacted by change, who's got valuable input for that change. And if you can bring them along with you, everything goes a lot smoother. You're not going to please everybody all the time, but at least if you ask and listen to their perspectives, even after the change has been implemented, to your point in terms of adoption, it makes a big impact, I think. I did have a thought on the COVID situation too. Wanted to circle back to that. I did see that many organizations were forced to change very quickly. And many were surprised that they managed to do that okay. And so that does give me some hope that, necessary change can be managed and can lead to some positive outcomes. But what I will say, to your point on isolation and pain, and how much people are dealing with right now, it does seem like everybody's mental health and mental concerns are a little bit closer to the surface than ever before. I have had more comments about mental health in the last 3 years than probably all 50 years prior to that. Okay. And I don't see that getting any better right now, right? I continue to see people having challenges on a lot of different levels and having difficulty dealing with some of those challenges. So, and anything that they can control, anything that they have ownership of, feels like a safe place, and changes being done to them elicit a very negative response. Yeah.
Hey, Antonio, you're a people and culture expert. What are your thoughts around this?
Thank you, John. I mean, first of all, Marisa, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and notion around change resistance and overall change management experience. I'm actually a researcher of, can you hear me? All good?
Yes.
All good.
Okay. I was saying I'm also a researcher of organizational change, more specifically, change leadership perspectives. So to a certain degree, I've dedicated quite a lot of time towards understanding this whole notion of change resistance. And as a matter of fact, Karen and I are working on some of these projects that are oriented towards making the workplace more human, trying to address some of these issues that people experience, specifically noting that change resistance is quite an emotional intensive experience. And from our research and some of the findings that we've got from working with practitioners, we've learned that a change leader actually serves the purpose of being of an attachment object or an attachment person who represents some form of anxiety alleviation, similar to the way, for example, coaches and athletes behave, or teachers and students. So there's a lot of these change related knowledge transfer involved in some of these processes. So, I was just curious about, Marisa, some of your experience towards this. You primarily focused in your presentation on the frameworks, on operational details. I'm just curious about your experience with these softer elements, with some of these cultural stuff. Is there anything you could share with us from your rich experience in research?
Thank you. I'll offer 2 or 3 points. Thank you for that question. First of all, when I talked about getting the change team on the same page, it really helps for the change team to understand what the stakeholders are going to be experiencing, so they'll know what they're going to experience and how they handle that. We expect people to know how to handle this, and they do not. So, for example, my remark that people will respond negatively or with, anxiousness, I won't belabor, you know what I mean? My response is to hear them. I don't take it personally. Our leaders have to, that is why there's so much talk about communication, but very little about the specifics. And communication takes so much time. The point is that this time is necessary because our stakeholders have to move through something that we've already moved through. So to your point, our leaders need to understand how urgent their role is as setting a model for other people, giving people a chance to speak up and be heard. And this point that has been said about something we call co-creation. I personally will make this remark, it's kind of flippant, but as people who do change, I think it really is incumbent upon us. If we're asking all these people to do these massive changes, we really ought to be able to flex sometimes in our own approaches, right? And I think that's a lesson we can all take on board, and that gives us much greater credibility with our constituents. The last thing I'll say is that to the points that have been made, it's about each individual's what's in it for me. We can't force people to change. And so our frontline individuals have different priorities. We need to speak to them in the language they understand and that matters to them. We can't, too often leaders assume that these people that they need to bring through this change understand what they're supposed to do. And digital transformation, it's classic. We're going to have all these efficiencies, and they don't say, and so you will be doing X. So that leaves a big gap for me to say, and so I will be looking for a new job, right? So that's where all this goes, is we leave all this out. What's in it for me?
So let's get
Thank you very much.
the floor. And Tiffany, could you share your question and tell everybody where you're coming from?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tiffany Watson. I'm mostly in the energy sector. So I've been in like really small companies, like where it's like less than 100 people, all the way up to really large corporations. One of the things that I've seen, even if it's a small or a large, is mergers. And you have a culture where you have pre-merger people, and then you also have post-merger people. And can it can be anybody or yourself, Maurice. What are your experiences with dealing with post-merger companies, and what would you suggest? Because usually you're kind of like merging on paper, but you're not really merging. So how do you get to that point? And I know you kind of never will get perfect, but how do you even start that ball rolling?
I have experience in this area, and I also am confident there are other people on this call who do too. So I'm going to give some folks a chance to chime in for you, Tiffany. And I must say thank you for that question. It's awesome.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Well, I can share some of the experiences that I've had. These were some of the projects which involved mergers of larger companies, which were, formally could not be called acquisitions. They were more backed as mergers. And in fact, the big issue was the question of identity. So something that, for example, a lot of the standard methodologies doesn't necessarily address, if that makes sense to you. So what I've learned to appreciate and understand is the common interest in reshaping the culture, reshaping the whole system of values. Because now there's all these individuals who have to work together, who were maybe competitors up to recently, or maybe don't see things equally in terms of strategy and where the organization is going to go. So there's a lot of effort in put into the creation of this strategic narrative that's going to drive this new identity that people will be embracing and then moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for that, Antonio. So we've got folks.
Vincenzo has his hand up on this one as well, perhaps.
Sure, Vinny, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Hello, everybody. I guess this goes back to the question of maybe what kind of tools could be used specifically maybe for mergers that occur where there's some ambiguity as far as getting the groups to mesh. I think a really interesting tool that you can utilize is a hierarchical diagram that depicts all the resources and the processes, right, aligned with the values of the overall aggregate company now. And then when you're looking at that diagram, look at where all of the handoffs occur relative to the people or the resources, because that really helps identify the integration between the merger and why it occurred. And that simple diagram can help improve the buy-in from the teams, right? Along with eliminating the resistance coming from the concept of doing nothing because it's cheapest, right? In a sense. So that's just something I want to share with the group. I think it's something that's super effective, especially when you're talking about where the handoffs occur.
I like that.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a comment to make?
In my experience, I think you just can't underestimate the importance of the culture. When I've been through companies that merged before, it was the culture of the companies as they were, that was the biggest driver of how successful that merger and therefore all the ensuing change was. If you're coming from a culture that is very hands off and there's a lot of autonomy and that sort of thing, and you're merging with a company where the culture is very authoritative or authoritarian, or trying to put the people in those two companies together without a really vigorous change management process where you're bringing them along with you is almost impossible. I mean, it's done, but it's very negative experience for pretty much everyone involved.
So what kind of tools and ideas have been working for you to mitigate the risks? We heard from Vinny, we've heard some other things. We've got some other folks. We've got Allison, who's an asset manager for an oil and gas firm. We've got David, who's Equinor. Sorry, Sarah, who's with Equinor. She runs the country management team. David, your general manager of the public media, WFSU and Tallahassee. Anybody there want to share any of their experiences? Allison, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I can speak a little of that. You know, we had a merger several years back. I was living in Norway, and it was Norsk Hydro merging with Statoil. And I think what Antonio said earlier about identity was quite important. And to the last comment that Jana made about culture, this is where you had two companies with very similar cultures in terms of both being very Norwegian companies. But we didn't actually stop referring to people by I'm ex Hydro or I'm ex Statoil, really until we changed our name to Equinor. You know, it really took, you know, we became Statoil Hydro and then we became Statoil. And then it really wasn't until we became Equinor that you really started to see us lose and shed our previous identities. And that was unfortunately quite a long time.
That's brilliant. Really brilliant. Thank you for sharing.
I remember that too. No, I worked with a number of people, and you're absolutely right. I never noticed that until you just said it. But
Right.
I had contacts with like he drove this and then, but yeah, once it became Equinor, maybe because everybody maybe equally didn't like the name.
Yeah, well, and you know, while the culture, if you compare it to say an ExxonMobil or to a Chevron, I mean, the cultures between the two companies were very similar. The minutia and the detail, we found the culture is very different. So the cultural aspect, I think, even when you are actually very similar, the people involved will find the differences in the culture.
Link, I see you've got your hand. Good to see you, Link. What's on your mind?
There we go. I know that you like me to turn on my camera, and I've been out and about and listening to the conversation and thinking about all the different aspects of the conversation. So I kind of like to wrap it all into one, you know, from the COVID conversation and it forcing us into a world of digital transformation and change that was unprecedented, that we never expected. And the rich and powerful got more rich and powerful and came out with innovations that really scaled things for businesses. And now we're seeing, you know, with all this change management, a piece of trust and how we've previously understood trust over the years contained within one system, one government. Now this change management is adopting new forms of artificial intelligence and machine learning and scaling businesses and corporations to be global. And so when we think about change management in different countries where you might have, like I'm working with one company that is stationed in Jerusalem, serves Saudi Arabia, but has offices in the United States and a workforce down in South Africa. And so when you think about all the different aspects of how they translate communication and information and share what is happening in the company, that communication can transmit very quickly now, but it's happening in a way that people are not adopting and trusting these new forms of technology. So it's not just about race and identity and things like that anymore. When we think about difference and culture, it's actually the culture of different ways of doing things, that we know that half the world's population doesn't have access to the internet yet and is just getting that access. So when we think about how quickly things have transformed now with the introduction of ChatGPT alone last month, and what that's going to do to the adoption of different forms of AI and how that's going to affect change, I think that we need to increase the dialogue about international communication and cultural change and what that looks like with speed and the rate of which technology is growing. So thank you. That's my 2 cents.
Excellent.
Anybody else want to share? David, what's happening out in the world of media?
Thank you, John. My comments are going to seem pretty pale and small compared to what I just heard Link share with the group, but I will share on the idea of merger. I have seen and been a part of 2 failed merger attempts of public broadcasting entities, that it was, the culture was right. We had a great business plan. We operationally, between myself and my fellow general manager, who we would be combining our organizations, we were on the same page on everything. We could not convince our boards of directors, though, that this was the right thing to do, because I think the identity of the larger group becoming the kind of the driving force of the organization over my smaller group of board of directors. Interestingly enough, I think it was the larger group, the larger organization that felt that they were not going to be receiving what they expected from the merger. So they can even great ideas can fall by the wayside if your board's not in support of it. Here at WFSU, and I'll make this very quick, we've been successful over the last 12 months partnering with the journalism research organization in St. Petersburg called the Pointer Institute. And the Pointer Institute has been training particularly public media organizations, NPR and PBS is what I'm talking about, of kind of changing their model of how to create content and find audiences that you may not have traditionally found. And through their help, we were able, we saw the need to have input from people of departments across my organization, not just on the content and news side. So I think that allowed us to look at this more globally and really have affected change within the organization that continues to need to have a lot more support from everyone and understanding and appreciation, but it's worked fairly well.
That is a great story, really a great story. And what I hear you saying is really jumping on that co-creation and delivering on the value of the extra time and effort it took was really measurable.
Yeah.
I love this comment that I received. It says, we're coming to a time where we all have 4 generations working together in an office. Change is something that we've got to get good at faster, real quick, right?
Yes.
Any last comments from anybody before we allow Marise to wrap it up? Still have time. It's a topic that we're not giving enough time to, but hey, that's life. The good news is we can all connect and follow up. Well, Marise, any final words from you from what you've heard today?
Well, I'm really excited by this conversation on several fronts. And among the reasons I'm excited is that I see myself joined by people who are working on these heavyweight challenges, who are aware, mindful, and care about doing change well. And one of the things that I'm very keen on is that we I'm going to put air quotes around the word business, we who are responsible for this challenge, meeting the challenge we're working on, we need to own and have capability, acumen, understanding around how to move it forward and not abdicate it to others. Very often, as in, for instance, post-merger, these things can be, and I mean, I understand everybody's hands are full, but these can be abdicated to HR. HR has a great role to play. I'm not saying anything bad about HR. What I'm saying is we need to own our business, if you will, as well. So, and HR needs our partnership. I'll even say it that way. So this transparency that I hear is very heartening. The other thing is the appreciation about trust. I really do. I liked the smiles that I got when I talked about being able to, quote unquote, eat our own dog food, because we don't want to end up like this guy right here. We'll wind up like the dinosaurs if we can't make all these changes happen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much, Marisa. That'll be the final word. And so, folks, I've just turned on the survey. Please let us know how we're doing. And I wanted to also remind you that the post show notes will be coming out soon. I'll hit your email. And if you want today's attendee contact list, please let us know. You can include that in the survey result. Maybe a transcript, maybe the personal introduction to specific people or attendees. Let us know in the survey. We'll send you the membership link so you can get access to exactly what you need, because we know authentic connections, expanding networks, never more important to your business. So what's next up on From the Experts? April 11th, we have S&P Global Commodity Insights talking about hydrogen and ammonia markets, how to price them, the concepts around pricing them. We'll have Santiago Soria with us. April 18th, we're glad to have Google on the show. Sustainability and energy transition lead Trinity Lloyd. She's going to share how they're applying big data technology to create affordable, low carbon power solutions for communities and business ecosystems. It's about ecosystems and at scale. It's going to be interesting. And May 2nd, unfortunately, I can see that Abhijit dropped off, but he'll be joining us. He's CEO and co-founder of Sirinor, and they are leading the way to decarbonizing aviation, the aviation industry. And they're going to talk why hydrogen is actually the solution there. So with over 1,900 members, 20,000 followers across 25 industries, the FT network is growing quickly thanks to you. Please learn about the packages, becoming a member, and register for other shows just like this one on our website at fte.network, and invite others you want to network with. This is your network, and that's what we do. Well, folks, we're out of time, and I want to thanks once again, Marisa, thank you very much for coming, and for all of you for joining From the Experts and being on the FTE show today. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.